In Despicable Me 3, Drew introduced us to this guy, the Bald Terror. He's the greatest villain of all time, who was Gru's father. He had this super cool lab with 1,000,000 deadly weapons, a dark and mysterious castle, and an entire legacy of Gru's ancestors being the most feared villains ever. Then Illumination completely forgot about this insane plot setup and gave us Cockroach Man instead. But in My Despicable Me 5, Gru's father, the Bald Terror, has returned. Robert just heard the news of an international hero who's been getting a lot of popularity lately, who's been defeating villain after villain. He refreshes the page because this must be a mistake, but it's no mistake. It's his own son. He's terribly confused and disappointed. Was going to get the milk a mistake? He looks at the date and sees Gru's been doing this for too long to go back to villainy. He probably did secretly check in on Gru once in a while and saw he's still making his gadgets, so he assumed Gru is still doing evil. He never even fathomed the possibility that Gru could be using them for good. He starts to panic in rage and flips tables and punches doors because he let down his ancestors. The century family tradition is no more. Drew mentioned Dad was disappointed in him because Drew wasn't a good enough villain. Not only is Gru not a villain at all anymore, but he's on the complete other side. He's trying to take down villains. What's going to be his father's reaction to that? And what's he going to do to Gru? But there's no time for disappointment because the Bald Terror just came up with the most genius, most evil, most heartless, most despicable plan in history. If he can't convince Gru to become a villain, he'll just have to, well, you'll see. He starts up his super cool car, it roars like a lion. He puts on golden sunglasses, then he combs his bright blonde hair and polishes his bald head. He starts the car full speed and blasts through the garage door without opening it in typical cartoon fashion. Then does a super loud evil laugh louder than anything in the Despicable Me series. Then the theme song for the series plays. But first, what's gonna make this guy the best villain in the franchise, and why hasn't he ever talked to his own children? The Bald Terror was said to be the greatest villain of all time. In fact, he was so great, everything was too easy for him. He's robbed every bank, stolen every artifact, and defeated everyone there is to defeat. He eventually finds everything to be boring and meaningless like Megamind did. He retires and finds something else worthwhile, raising kids who will also become killer villains and continue the family tradition. Then he left to get the milk and abandoned his children. Why did he do this? It's because of a special, unique mentality he has, called survival of the fittest. He believes that life is a competition, and whoever is the strongest should have their way. If you're able to outpower someone and rob his house successfully, then you should be able to keep the stuff you stole. This is the way it has been for centuries. The superior species thrive while the inferior species go extinct, and the alphas of the pack, the ones who are able to physically beat everyone else, get more privileges. It's natural law, so who are the government to interfere with this? He abandoned Gru because, unlike most fathers, he didn't want to help his son at all. He wanted to see if the son is fit enough to learn on his own. Only then will he be worth his time. This is a unique mindset that's never been given to any villain before, making him somewhat sympathetic, but not completely to still keep the evilness and mystery in him. It also gives a new perspective on the Despicable Me universe with all these villains. The Bald Terror is also an extremely charismatic and mysterious villain like Wolf of Wall Street, American Psycho, or Hannibal Lecter. And obviously, he is the greatest villain of all time, so you bet he's going to have some badass action moves too. Creating the perfect recipe for a great villain. But I'm not all tell and no show like the Cockroach Man. I'm going to show you why this villain is the best. He arrives at Gru's house. Gru walks outside and asks, "Who are you and what do you want?" Robert reaches his hand in his pocket, Gru takes out his freeze ray and fires it, but the Bald Terror, just like we see in the painting, has a better freeze ray, and out freeze rays Gru's freeze ray and freezes Gru's hand. He walks up to Gru and says, "Pleasure to meet you, Gru." He reaches his hand out and offers Gru a handshake, but to the hand he just froze off. What a giga Chad. Gru says, What? How do you know my name? Gru's dad. Because I am your father.
I am your father.
Robert then pickpockets the house keys from Gru's pocket and walks in his house. Whoa, mister, where are you going? I'm going into your house. I believe that is quite obvious. Robert then enters Gru's house and says, "You may come in," to Gru about his own house. He then meets the three girls and greets them like your classic grandpa. Gru tries to kick him out of the house, but then he says, "I am your grandfather, and I've got a surprise for you." And then he gives each one of the girls a present. When they open it, it's shiny new golden villain gadgets like laser guns and mini rockets. The girls are all excited and they thank and hug Robert. Gru's quote-unquote dog runs to bite Robert, but he takes out a big juicy bone and the dog is well satisfied chewing on it, and is no longer interested in his duties in guarding the house. Wait a minute, how did you know I have a dog? Gru makes his classic Gru face when he realizes Robert's probably here to stay, because the girls like him now. Robert then walks up the stairs and enters Gru's bedroom and sits on his couch. Hey, that's my bed. Don't worry, you can sleep on the couch. Robert says it's story time and begins telling the girls cool stories of all the cool things he did in his villainy days. Gru disappointedly walks out. This is all so surprising and scary to him. I mean, you would be terrified too if a scary dude much stronger than you starts charming your kids. He has no clue what this guy wants to do with the girls. What could his terrible plan be? But Gru's not going to wait and find out. He reports this to the AVL, and Ramsbottom orders a massive assault in the night for his arrest. When Ramsbottom asks Gru for details on his appearance, Gru says he's got gold blonde hair and a bald head. While writing that down, Ramsbottom drops his pen and freezes. What's the matter? You're not talking about the Bald Terror, are you? Unfortunately, I kinda am. Ramsbottom gets PTS flashbacks of all the things the Bald Terror did to them. He's the only villain in the world the organization could not catch. Ramsbottom presses a cartoony big red button and alarm sound. Every free agent drops their coffee and donuts and immediately reports to Ramsbottom's office. Ramsbottom tells them the situation and orders every single available AVL agent to arrest the Bald Terror tonight. When the time comes, Robert is sleeping in his bed, or technically Gru's bed. AVL agents blast through the window and take out their tasers. The Bald Terror slowly yawns and gets up. The agents tase him, but he's wearing a rubber suit. He predicted this to happen. Robert opens the cabinet and combs his hair, then proceeds to beat the living crap out of all the agents using cool kung fu moves. When the agents are defeated, he pulls an Uno reverse and puts the agents' handcuffs on the agents. You are under arrest for waking me up. Then more agents barge through the door with net guns. He flips the bed to use it as a shield, and it blocks all the nets. He punches a hole through the bed with his freeze ray and freezes all the agents, while still being behind the bed's cover. He looks out his window and sees a bunch of AVL agents surrounding the house. We have you surrounded. Surrender at once or prepare to face the consequences. Alright, look guys, I'm a little sleepy right now, so let's truce. He then gives back the agents he just froze and arrested, in exchange for leaving him alone. The other agents, crapping their pants, have no choice but to accept. They leave him alone. Now, unfortunately, Gru is on his own. The next day, Gru finally realizes Robert's evil plan. It's far worse than anything he could have imagined. What is it? So basically, the plot of this movie is that if Robert can't convince Gru to become a villain again, he'll have to convince his children, therefore still continuing the family tradition. Robert slowly and sneakily manipulates the girls into joining the dark side while Gru tries to pull them back to the light. Lucy works with the AVL to figure out a way to defeat the Bald Terror before it's too late, before Robert accomplishes his final objective of winning the girls over enough until they're willing to leave Gru and move away with him. Gru's final objective is to win over his girls enough so that they'll no longer want him in the house, so Gru could kick him out or take the girls away from him and live someplace Robert won't find them. Sorta like that movie Daddy's Home, where both parents fight for their children's love. Still, sticking to the theme of the franchise, which is family and all the joys and problems that come with them. Despicable Me 5 will cover kids having different ideologies than their parents, which is a slightly more mature theme, but is very relevant to real life because a lot of the time kids do have different political, lifestyle, and other beliefs from their parents. And not knowing how to work with that can tear families apart. Gru has a different ideology than his father, and Gru's children will also have a different ideology than Gru. That'll show the theme well and lead to interesting conflicts. More about the solution of this problem later, because speaking of interesting conflicts, one of the things Robert does is, when Margo is at school, Robert bribes one of the big kids there to bully Margo. Big kid then pushes Margo, turns her upside down, shakes her, and takes her lunch money like a classic Disney bully. Margo then cries and goes to Robert, not bothering to question why a grown man is allowed in her school. Grandpa Robert, that big kid stole my money. Yes, he did. What should I do? Gru would have told you to tell a teacher, but not me. Let me ask you this. Why was he able to steal your money? Because he's stronger than me? Correct. Is there anything you are better at than that guy? I guess I'm smarter than him? Alright, then get to work. Robert then points to the science lab and walks away. Margo walks in wondering what to do. She remembers the evil gadget presents Robert gave her, and how they look and what parts they have. Margo then constructs a gadget of her own, a skinny ray that basically evaporates the fat from anyone's body. Don't ask me how the science would work for that or how a teenager was so easily able to construct it. That's just Despicable Me logic. She walks up to the big kid about to buy lunch, she uses the ray on him, and now he's really skinny. Margo pushes him and takes back her lunch money, while turning him upside down this time. Robert, looking from outside the window, mouth signals to Margo to take his lunch money too. Margo thinks about doing so, wondering what moral path she should take. Eventually, she thinks that the big kid, well, he's the skinny kid now, but she thinks that he didn't think twice before robbing her. So why should she think twice before robbing him? That and the fact that she did the work and was able to come up with the idea and construct the skinny ray, she won the battle. So she deserves his lunch money, just like a certain someone taught her. Things are not looking good for Gru and Lucy. Their children are getting corrupted and leaning towards the dark side. Another example of something he would do is when the girls ask to borrow $20 so they can buy another stuffed animal for Agnus, Robert does what any good father would do and teaches them how to rob a bank. He's even kind enough to go on the bank robbery with them to show the girls how it's done. But Dad, do we really need that much money just to buy a stuffed animal? What can I say, Margo? Inflation is crazy these days. When they go to rob the bank, there are a bunch of jokes and funny scenes, because you can't have a Despicable Me movie without humor. Like when Robert's on the heist with them and he explains how to do everything like an elementary school teacher on a field trip with her class. Speaking of humor, more instances we can add humor is during Gru's cringy failed attempts to appeal to the girls. Stuff like Brad did in Daddy's Home, but with a Despicable Me spin on it to keep things original. Like when Gru dresses up as Robert and starts talking exactly like him, thinking that would work. And obviously the minions help Gru out too. We can't leave them out, can we? They do their classic minion-y adorable things like preparing a PowerPoint presentation for the girls, explaining why villainy is wrong. But it's all written in minionese and spoken in minionese, so the girls literally understand nothing. Or the minions do a skit where Kevin slaps Bob, Stuart yells at Kevin to stop, then Kevin walks away and Bob smiles and hugs Stuart, demonstrating the pros of being a hero. Comedy gold, right? Then there's also the action element when Lucy, the AVL, and Nefario, who was working on a really big science project developing a way to clone objects, leaves his work because of his loyalty to Gru to help them figure out how to beat this guy. They try a bunch of different things at night, neither of them working, of course. This creates a perfect balance of humor, family drama, and action that the Despicable Me series specializes in, and the recipe for a good Despicable Me movie. But wait, what is the solution to all this chaos, you say? How are families supposed to deal with each other's different ideologies? Well, that leads me to how the climax of this movie should go. Do you want to be able to change my videos? Join my Discord where I'll be posting video scripts early, and if you suggest something better than what I thought, I'll change it and give you a shout out. There would be something like in the first Despicable Me movie where Robert, just like Vector, takes the girls in his golden supercar and is going to disappear with them forever, because the girls now fully support villainy and want to start a career as villains. Just when all hope is lost, Gru comes up with a genius idea that will surely convince the girls to stop being villains. But Robert is taking off in his golden supercar with the girls. Gru gets in his giant, pointy metal thing, and there is an extremely cool car chase, where everything the AVL, Nefario, and Lucy worked on throughout the movie comes in handy when Gru uses it to win the chase. Like a bubblegum blaster to make Robert's wheels sticky, and a new and enhanced fart gun, a fart cannon that launches a giant cloud of fart obscuring Robert's view, and a minion catapult where a minion gets catapulted onto Robert and rips off the little hair he has left that he spent so much time combing, really making him the bald terror. Gru fires another minion in front of Robert's car, and because minions are basically indestructible, the car gets heavily damaged and comes to a halt. Gru steps out of his car and the bald terror steps out of his. They look at each other like it's a cowboy standoff. They both draw their freeze rays and fire. Just like last time, Robert's better freeze ray pushes back Gru's freeze ray blast. But then, Gru takes out a second freeze ray Dr. Nefario gave him. Nefario cloned it. I mentioned earlier that Nefario was working on a cloning project. Gru fires the second freeze ray and freezes Robert's hand. Gru walks up to him, offering him a handshake to the same hand he froze off, just like Robert did in the start. "You're not going to give me a goodbye handshake?" Gru then shows the girls images of the consequences of their villainy, like how the skinny kid was crying after he got his lunch money stolen, and how the security guards at the bank got fired and can no longer provide for their family, and similar consequences of all the other villainy they did throughout the movie, using the fact that the girls are still kids and kids are innocent. No matter what, they'll always feel bad when seeing someone in pain. The girls finally learn their lesson and want to go back with Gru, but Robert is not just going to let that happen. If he can't continue the villainous bloodline, he'll just have to end it and freeze Gru and the girls for eternity. Robert breaks the ice on his hand. Gru prepares for round 2. But the girls step up in front of him and they fight the bald terror. How on earth will they win? Well, because Robert made a fatal mistake teaching the girls everything he knows. So now the girls use everything Robert taught them in the bank and in other times in the movie, not mentioned in this video, otherwise it would be an hour long. Margo even uses her skinny ray, because the bald terror no longer can play surprise tricks like with the AVL, because the girls know all of them. Robert is finally defeated. You would think that this would make him super angry, but it didn't. That's right, he's actually proud. It's the first time he's ever been defeated, and there's nobody he'd rather lose to than his own grandkids. He says, "Alright, fine, you guys can be heroes, but on one condition. The family tradition is that every generation is the best villains, so now, even though Gru's family aren't villains, they still have to be the best, whether they're the best villains or the best heroes, or the best anything else. This can also be applied to real life. Not in the exact way, but you can set a core value with your children that you believe they should follow. That way, even though you may have different ideologies or politics, you'll all still be the same at your cores." And that's Despicable Me 5. But wait, what's the lore of Despicable Me? Why are villains such a casual thing? Who started this trend? Is it Robert? Was it the Bank of Evil? Was it both? I'll make a spin-off on the Bald Terror, how everything started and what made Robert believe the things he believes, if this video gets 1,000 likes. Till then, you can watch my Despicable Me 4 rewrite. It has a connection to this video you don't want to miss.